Hey yo, what's good, people? It's your boy reporting live from Kevin Garnett's sneaker closet. Kevin Garnett did not have a quiet sneaker run at all. He had a sneaker run that matched his game. Long, loud, intense, and built like it wanted problems. From those early Nike joints to the Air Garnett line, then into the space-age Flight Posit era and the Adidas years, KG shoes moved just like he did. Aggressive, different, and never meant to blend in. So let's run through the kicks that carry one of the fiercest dudes to ever step on the NBA floor. If KG was one of your favorites, hit that like button, subscribe, and let's get into it. Before Kevin Garnett had his own signature shoe, he already looked like somebody the sneaker world was watching. The Nike Air Way Up was a part of the early phase back when KG was still this impossibly young, impossibly skinny force of nature trying to figure out how one human being could be all elbows, knees, intensity, and raw talent at the same time. He came into the league straight out of high school looking like he had been stretched in Photoshop, and the Air Way Up fit that whole mid-90s basketball look perfectly. Big, bold, aggressive, and made for the kind of player who did not exactly believe in taking plays off. If the Air Way Up felt like the introduction, the Air Max Uptempo felt more like the league starting to catch on that Kevin Garnett was not just a novelty act. He was not just a fresh kid out of high school with crazy length and upside. By this point, you could see the outline of the monster forming. The confidence was getting louder, the game was getting meaner, and those big Nike Uptempos fit right into that moment because they had the same energy. All muscle, no apology. The Uptempo line in the mid-90s was built for players who played with force, and that made it a natural match for KG even though his game was different from a traditional bruiser. He was smoother than a lot of big men, quicker than a lot of forwards, and wired like a man who drank battery acid before tip-off. But the shoe still worked because it carried that same heavy-duty, high-impact look that defined so much of the 90s basketball aesthetic. This was back when hoops shoes did not care about being low-profile or subtle. They wanted to be seen from the cheap seats. Now this is where the story really starts cooking, because once Nike gave Kevin Garnett the Air Garnett, it was official. He was no longer just a young star wearing whatever fit the moment. He had crossed into that smaller room, the one reserved for players that brands believed could carry their own identity. And for KG, that mattered, because by then he was becoming one of the most unique players in the league. He was too tall, too skilled, too intense, and too versatile to fit into the old boxes people liked using for big men. The Air Garnett had a job of matching that. It needed to feel like Kevin Garnett without turning into some cartoon version of Kevin Garnett. That is part of why this shoe stands out in his story. It was a signature model, but it did not scream for attention in some desperate way. It had presence though, real presence, the kind that made sense for a player who could give you a stare that felt like a threat and then turn around and hit a face-up jumper like a guard. KG was never about cute little flourishes. His whole thing was edge, length, pride, and fire, and the Air Garnett fit that mood. The Air Garnett 2 felt like the first shoe had done its job, and now Nike could lean in a little harder. Kevin Garnett was no longer just the exciting young star with upside spilling out of his sleeves. He was turning into one of the nastiest matchup problems in basketball. Too quick for bigger guys, too long for smaller guys, and too emotional for anybody hoping he would just go quietly. The second Air Garnett arrived at the right sweet spot where his game was sharpening and his identity was getting louder. What makes this shoe interesting is that it sits in the middle chapter a lot of people skip over when they talk about KG. They jump from young phenom straight to full-blown legend, but the Air Garnett 2 lives in the grind. This is that stage where he was building the reputation brick by brick, possession by possession, and scream by scream. Minnesota was becoming his kingdom, and this shoe feels like part of that climb. Not flashy in a gimmicky way, not just trying to be some over-designed science project, just a serious basketball shoe for a serious problem. By the time the Air Garnett 2 showed up, Kevin Garnett no longer felt like a star on the rise. He felt established. Not comfortable, not softened up, not settled in like he was ready to coast, but established in that dangerous way where a player knows exactly who he is and starts carrying himself like the whole building belongs to him. That's why the third Air Garnett stands out in his story. It feels like the most memorable shoe from his Nike signature run. A lot of players get signature lines, but not every signature line finds the right rhythm. Sometimes the first shoe is figuring things out, the second is trying to improve on it, and the third one is where everything locks in. That is kinda what the Air Garnett 3 feels like. It had a stronger identity, a little more authority, and the timing lined up with KG becoming one of the most relentless forces in the league. He was not just putting up numbers, he was imposing himself on games with that mix of skill, fury, and full volume emotion that made him impossible to ignore. Some dudes played hard. KG played like the court had insulted his family. Now this is where Kevin Garnett's sneaker story stops knocking politely and kicks the door clean off the hinges, because the Nike Air Flight Posit KG, also known as the Air Flight Posit 2, did not look like a normal basketball shoe at all. It looked like something that fell off a spaceship, got approved by Nike, and somehow ended up on the feet of one of the most intense players in the league. And somehow, with KG, it worked. This shoe mattered because it matched the strangest and most electric parts of his presence. Garnett was never supposed to feel this fluid at that size. He was a 7-footer who moved with speed, skill, and chaos, and the Flight Posit 2 had the same kind of energy. It looked futuristic, aggressive, a little weird, and completely uninterested in fitting in. Perfect. That is Kevin Garnett in sneaker form. By the time Kevin Garnett got to Adidas, the whole vibe changed. The Nike years had already given him the young phenom phase, the signature shoe phase, and the futuristic Flight Posit chapter. But the Adidas KG bounce felt like a different kind of statement. This was not about introducing him to the world anymore. Everybody already knew who he was. This was about reinforcing the fact that he was still one of the most unique big men in basketball, and now he was doing it in a new uniform with a new brand and a new look under his feet. The name alone tells you a lot. Bounce. That was Adidas leaning into performance tech, sure, but it also fit Garnett's game in a funny way, because for a guy built like a skyscraper with a grudge, he moved with way more spring and fluidity than he had any business moving with. KG was never some plodding paint camper. He covered ground, switched gears fast, and played with that twitchy intensity like his engine didn't come with an off switch. The shoe had to match a player who was still long, explosive, and emotional, but now more polished and more battle-tested. The Adidas Garnett 1 feels like the moment the Adidas partnership really planted its feet. The KG bounce introduced the new chapter, but this shoe felt more personal, more direct, more like the brand saying, no, this is Kevin Garnett's lane now. And that matters, because by this stage, KG was not some experiment or emerging star anymore. He was one of the league's most respected and feared veterans, the kind of player whose intensity had become part of his legend. And what makes the Garnett 1 interesting is that it came during a period when Garnett's reputation was already solid as concrete. He didn't need sneaker hype to prove he mattered. He had already done that with his game, his motor, and that famous emotional edge that made him seem like he took every possession personally. So the shoe did not have to introduce him. It just had to feel worthy of him. That is a different assignment, and honestly, a harder one. There is also something fitting about KG having a shoe like this during his Adidas run, because Adidas basketball had a different personality than Nike. It felt a little less glossy, a little more grounded, and a little more built for hooping than built for posters. That actually works for Garnett. For all the emotion and big personality, there was always something blue-collar about the way he played. He talked loud, but he worked even louder. The Garnett 1 fit that side of him. The Adidas Garnett 2 feels like Kevin Garnett settling deeper into that veteran warrior phase, where everything about him had more weight to it. Not slower, not softer, just heavier in presence. By then, KG had reached that point in a great player's career where he did not have to announce himself anymore. The reputation walked in before he did. Opponents knew the volume, knew the intensity, knew the stare, and they knew the effort was going to be there from opening tip to the final buzzer. The Garnett 2 fits that version of him well, because it feels like a shoe made for a player whose identity was already fully stamped. What makes this pair work in the story is that it reflects a more mature version of Garnett without making him feel watered down. That is important. A lot of veteran-era shoes can feel like they belong to a player who has entered easing into the back nine of his career. KG wasn't built like that. Even when he got older, he still carried himself like the game had personally offended him. So the Garnett 2 does not come across like a quiet continuation. It feels more like another chapter in a long-running rivalry between Kevin Garnett and Peace of Mind. By the time the Adidas Garnett 3 arrived, Kevin Garnett's sneaker story had become less about ascent and more about authority. He was not chasing validation anymore. He was walking around like a man who already had it, and now everybody else just had to deal with the consequences. That is what makes this shoe interesting. It comes from a point in his career where the mystery was gone, but the menace was still very much alive. Some shoes in a player's line feel tied to potential. Others feel tied to peak flash. The Garnett 3 feels tied to presence. That veteran, chest out, cut the nonsense version of KG. The one who could still impact the game with emotion, defense, leadership, and pure force of will. He was older by this stage, sure, but older Kevin Garnett was still not the kind of veteran anybody wanted to spend a full night dealing with. He was loud, still, sharp, still, and still intense, still giving off the kind of energy that made everybody around him sit up a little straighter. Kevin Garnett's sneaker story really moved like his career did. It started with that young, raw Nike phase, turned into a legit signature run, got futuristic with the Flight Posit chapter, then shifted into a tougher veteran-era Adidas run. The shoes changed, the brands changed, and the designs changed, but the personality never did. Every pair still felt like KG, intense, emotional, aggressive, and built to stand out. This is what makes his sneaker history so memorable. It was never just about the hype. It was about his presence, man. If you rock with KG, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop in the comments whose sneaker story we should cover next. And as always, and as usual, stay laced up, y'all. We'll be back with another one real soon. Peace.